Sorry, I can get quicker, guys.
It's a P5 for now. Charge off.
How far was I off?
3 tenths for P1. And 1 tenth to Charles.
Great job today, guys.
Yeah.
Ready for the push. Sorry, go quicker.
No worries, we're getting there. On cold push tomorrow.
How bad things have to be so that one of the best pilots in history releases by radio? How far was I? With a tone that looks more like a supplication than a technical consultation? The 2025 Italian Grand Prix became an emblematic episode to understand the true state of Ferrari form and, in particular, the level of internal tension that surrounds Lewis Hamilton. The classification in Monza not only reflected the track performance of each team, but also exposed technical, emotional, and strategic gaps that could define the rest of the season. In theory, Ferrari had to arrive in Monza as a contender at least symbolic for victory. Not only is his home career, but historically the Italian layout has been fertile terrain for memorable performances of the rampante Cavallino. However, reality was diametrically opposite. Max Verstappen, with its usual millimeter precision, marked a new circuit record with a time of 1:18,792. His return was so dominant that even the closest teams, such as McLaren, seemed to be one step back in terms of dynamic tuning and response of the car. Lando Norris and Oscar Piastri completed the top 3, consolidating the domain that McLaren has been building since 2024. Both pilots showed a fluid connection with the MCL39, a car that clearly responds with consistency and tolerance to the track variations, something that Ferrari's SF25 seems to be unable to do. Ferrari, on the other hand, closed the session with a 4th place for Charles Leclerc and a 5th for Lewis Hamilton, but the latter would have to fulfill a penalty of 5 posts on the grille. Although, on paper, a room in a 5th may seem acceptable on a grille as tight as that of 2025, the real problem is what is not seen in the times. The way they were achieved, the level of requirement necessary to get there, and the limit conditions that the SF25 needs to perform. These positions were, deep down, the result of an extreme effort, both of the team and the pilots, rather than a balanced and competitive car. And that became even more evident when the telemetry data and comments of the pilots themselves are compared. Leclerc, although more comfortable in Monza, acknowledged having had to deeply modify his driving style to adapt to the instability of the car. Hamilton, meanwhile, was visibly restless from the practical sessions. From the outside, the SF25 seemed to have a good tip speed thanks to its aggressive aerodynamic configuration, but that was achieved at the expense of the curves and the braking stability. What was sacrificed in aerodynamic support became a slab throughout the classification. In technical terms, Ferrari opted for a radical package in search of straight speed, aware that the temple of speed requires surgical aerodynamic efficiency. But that bet left them naked in the low and medium speed curves, just where McLaren and Red Bull managed to make differences more easily. In fact, the difference between Verstappen's time and Hamilton's was more than 3 tenths, which, in the context of the current Formula One, represents a technical abyss. Monza should be the place where Ferrari showed his true potential. Instead, it became a reflection of its structural limits. The Scuderia arrived with a clear plan, but ended up improvising on the march, while its rivals precisely executed its technical program. The contrast was not only evident in the times, but also in the internal reactions of the team, in radio communication strategies, and, above all, in the body language of its pilots when getting out of the car. During free practices in Monza, the signs were already worrisome. Hamilton couldn't find balance in the car. The front did not respond with precision in fast curve, while the rear train showed tensile instability. His communication with the wall was constant, full of technical feedback, but also emotional. One of the most revealing messages was, "Need sub more speed subject," a statement that synthesizes its frustration. The problem was not only a fine adjustment, but a structural lack that the team failed to solve. The most disturbing thing about that situation is that it is not an isolated incident. Hamilton had already shown signs of emotional wear in previous races. In Hungary, for example, he said that he felt absolutely useless at the wheel of the SF25, even suggesting that Ferrari probably needs to change pilot. Phrases like that do not appear by chance. They are the reflection of an internal pressure that goes far beyond track performance. They speak of an increasing disconnection between the pilot and his technical environment. In the specific case of Monza, which aggravates the situation, is symbolism. This is not any career. It is Ferrari's house, where every thousandth double account, where each error is magnified and each success becomes a legend. That Hamilton, in that scenario, transmits by radio such a vulnerable message not only portrays its individual frustration, but publicly exposes the collective limitations of the team. It is as if, in the midst of a national celebration, someone raised his voice to say that the king is naked. And the most worrying is the way in which this frustration accumulates. It is not a burst of rage, but a constant psychological erosion. Each session without progress, every failed attempt to find balance, each internal comparison with Leclerc that does not favor it, is wearing the mood of a pilot who, although experienced, is also human. The Hamilton we listened to by radio in Monza was not the indestructible champion of Mercedes in 2020, but a pilot who doubts, who questions, who desperately seeks a technical support point in an environment that still does not offer stability. The true dimension of that radio message is not in the sentence. Hamilton was not just asking for a fact. I was throwing an internal message. I am doing everything possible and it is not enough. I need the team to step forward because I am already at the limit. And when a pilot of his caliber throws such messages, it is because something deep is failing in the structure. That short moment by radio condensed all the tension of a relationship that is still looking for identity. Ferrari and Hamilton have not yet found a common language. And until they do it, those messages will continue to appear more and more frequently with more and more despair. At first glance, Ferrari SF25 might seem like a competitive car. Its aerodynamic design is clean, its peak speed on certain paths places it among the best in the group, and its performance in specific simulations has generated optimism on more than one occasion. But under that stylized and aggressive facade, some of the most frustrating technical limitations of the current grille are hidden. The car is not slow in absolute terms, but it is unbearably inconsistent. And that is, in the language of Formula One modern, a death sentence for any aspiration would be the title. Monza, with its high-speed layout and its areas of low aerodynamic load, presented that fragility with surgical clarity. Ferrari introduced a series of technical updates specifically designed for this circuit. An ultra-plane rear wing, virtually a speed table, and a front wing with reduced rope. In theory, this package should have maximized the speed in line, the strong point of the car on this track. However, what they won at peak speed lost it in the general behavior of the chassis. The car became unstable in strong braking, unpredictable in slow and dangerous curves in the transition between traction and acceleration. It was fast, yes, but intractable. The most worrying thing for Ferrari is not that his car is slow, because it is not, but is unpredictable. And in a category where the pilot's trust is the first link in the performance chain, having a car that behaves differently with each degree of temperature is a conviction. SF25 does not need an evolutionary improvement. You need a deep structural review. As long as that does not happen, no update, however radical, will be enough to stabilize it. Ferrari is trying to win a war with a scalpel on a battlefield where the rivals bring missiles. And that, perhaps, is his biggest problem. The way Hamilton communicates with his environment has changed. In Mercedes, their radio messages were almost always rational, measured, focused on strategic data or adjustments. In Ferrari, they have adopted a more emotional, more loaded tone. Questions like, how far was I off? They are not simple consultations. They are manifestations of a pilot who is dealing with the feeling of helplessness. And that, coming from someone accustomed to having control, is devastating. In Monza, this was exposed with brutal clarity. It was not just the disappointment of being fifth in the timetable. It was the way he lived it, body language after getting out of the car, the resignation contained when speaking with engineers, uncomfortable silence during post-classification analysis. Hamilton is caught in a narrative that Gloria promised and that now, on the other hand, returns technical frustration, operational mismatches, and an environment where she still does not seem to have found her emotional place. This episode lived in Monza, apparently a simple moment of frustration after classification, is actually a turning point. Not only for Lewis Hamilton, but for the entire Ferrari project in 2025. What is happening between pilot and team cannot be interpreted as a passenger technical stumbling. It is the reflection of a structural disconnection between the expectations of a multiple world champion and the reality of a team that, despite its history and resources, continues without solving the foundations of its competitiveness. The question is not whether Ferrari has potential, because it obviously has it. The question is whether you will know how to activate it before its biggest bet in years. The arrival of Hamilton becomes an emotional weight for both sides. What today is a frustrated pilot and a capricious car can, if it is not handled with intelligence, climb towards a much more difficult narrative to contain. That of a star that goes out prematurely inside a structure that promised redemption and has only delivered tension. Are we simply seeing the learning curve of a new cycle? Or is this the beginning of an inevitable deterioration between Hamilton and Ferrari, as we have seen before with other big names that failed to tame Maranello's mystique? Is this radio message a warning cry, or the first step towards a fracture that will mark the story of this season? I invite you to leave your opinion in the comments.